All right, time for probably the most important test. All right, that's still pretty good, pretty good. All right, how about the Geek? Oh yeah, this one's way better. Hey guys, Turk here. I hope you're having a good one. We have looked at the Steam Deck from all sorts of different angles, and over the past year, we have been searching for a PC handheld that is better than the Valve handheld. The Ayaneo Zoe A1 came pretty darn close. It performed really well, but the device and the company had their issues. And as it turns out, there's plenty of other competitors out there from GPD and Ayaneo and Ain. I just don't really want to fork up $1,000 to $1,200 to test yet another device. Lucky for us, Ayaneo does have a more affordable offering starting at $850 with the Ayaneo Geek. So today we're going to be covering it from sticks to triggers, talking about performance, battery life, ergonomics, and software to see if the Geek has what it takes to beat the Steam Deck when it comes to value as the king of the handhelds. Let's get to it. Under the hood, the Ayaneo Geek shares a lot of the same hardware of its more expensive brother. The Ryzen 7 6800U mobile APU powers the CPU and graphical hardware with the same specs as other high-end handhelds. The baseline Geek I'm testing today using 16GB of LPDDR5 6400 memory, the same as many of the other devices on the market today. To keep the device running, Ayaneo opted for a moderately sized battery here, using a 50.25 watt-hour battery. All of these specs are really important, but the main selling point for me has got to be the screen. This base model comes equipped with a familiar 7-inch 800p resolution screen, reportedly the same screen as its older predecessor, the Ayaneo Next Pro. Against our favorite Steam Deck, this panel is leagues ahead of the deck. Placed side by side, the Ayaneo Geek screen is noticeably brighter, much more vivid, and has more accurate colors than the Steam Deck. Sure, the deck can be tweaked to look better with plugins or adjusting the gamma curves, but the screen from the Ayaneo Geek is a well-deserved upgrade. If you plan on picking up the 1200p model, it'll be an even more luxurious experience. But I think the 800p screen here is more than enough in a handheld. Enough of the specs, let's get our hands on this bad boy. The first thing I notice is the grip, and it's a bit different than other handhelds. Naturally, I want to choke up on the device to get it completely in my hands, but that does feel a bit awkward. If I scoot back just a tad, the device sits a bit higher in my hands, and it feels much more comfortable. In this position, the joysticks line up perfectly with my thumbs, and given the taller sticks, they have a larger angle of motion. Let's not forget, the Geek uses the same Hall-based sensors as the more expensive unit, so in theory, no dead zones should be detected. Running the accuracy tester, I can confirm the full range of motion, but I do notice a small area of dead zone in the center of the stick, jumping from a value of 0 to about 0.2. This is less than ideal for a Hall effect sensor, but it's a great step in the right direction. The D-pad on the Geek is a solid upgrade when compared to the lackluster Ayaneo Zoe A1. Though it's not as pronounced as the Steam Decks, I can easily perform Super Metroid's Mach Ball to grab early super missiles. Moving over to the right, the XYAB buttons are incredibly clicky and feel so good. They are a bit stiffer than the deck, but they deliver a confident button press. The left and right shoulder buttons feel a lot better than the Ayaneo Zoe, but they are a bit more difficult to press than the deck. Now, the triggers seem to be a source of contention within the community. To me, I think they feel outstanding, and the placement feels just so natural. The triggers provide a long lever arm conducive to the analog nature of these Hall effect triggers, but it does introduce an issue. When you place the device onto a flat surface, the Geek rests on the triggers themselves, not the chassis. This may not be an issue in the short term, but it can lead to a scenario where the triggers get damaged due to a sudden slam or nudging a stationary Geek. The triggers could easily shave a couple of millimeters to prevent this sort of damage without giving up too much in the lever length. So far, the Geek's ergos are pretty impressive, but you guys want to know how this device performs. Rather than run a standard gauntlet of benchmarks that I usually do in videos, I wanted to try a different approach. I wanted to play some of the most popular games on the Steam Deck as of February 23. Some of the games on the list are less than ideal for benchmarking, and others are easy to play on the deck. Given my experience with the list, we'll be running through Hogwarts Legacy, Red Dead Redemption 2, Grand Theft Auto 5, and Cyberpunk 2077. Starting off with Hogwarts Legacy, it looks like the stock Steam Deck matches the somewhat modified Aoki Zoe A1. When I say slightly modified, my A1 has a fresh install of stock Windows and there is no Aoki Zoe software to be found on the device. The only other modification is I have increased the page file from the default dynamic usage up to 8 GB, as we've talked about in previous videos here on the channel. With that said, in Hogwarts Legacy, the Ayaneo Geek comes a few frames shy on the Quidditch broomstick races, but overall, this seems to be a pretty solid 30 FPS experience for all three devices. Cyberpunk 2077 continues to rank in the top 20 most popular games despite its intense graphical requirements. Again, the Geek comes several frames shy of the Aoki Zoe A1, and it's a whopping 18% behind the Steam Deck. Regardless, a decent 30 FPS experience is quite enough without my optimized settings, and I'll throw a link to that up at the top in case you were curious. Red Dead Redemption 2 is problematic for all three devices today. Without a bit of fiddling, Red Dead just won't run on the Steam Deck. As for the Geek and the A1, I've opted to run in DirectX 12 mode here, as to not mess with Vulkan's full screen issues with this title and vertical monitors. Regardless, all devices are within 10% of each other, and with my optimized settings, the game looks and feels really good. Nearly locked 30 FPS running around the streets of Saint Denis, solid performance from the Geek. Last is Grand Theft Auto 5. This one is interesting because it showcases one of the main benefits of the 6800U rather than the Steam Deck, and that is its CPU horsepower. Both the Geek and Aoki Zoe A1 perform better than the deck at PlayStation 4 quality settings, and it manages a locked 40 FPS experience. I take these measurements during the street shootout of the benchmark, so this is representative of actual gameplay. When run at 15 watts, the stock Ayaneo Geek performs well, but it appears to be outclassed by the Steam Deck and Aoki Zoe with its minor modifications. I wouldn't really call this a loss, but I think the Geek has to pick up the pace a bit in order to impress me and get that recommendation. One of the main benefits of running a handheld with the Ryzen 6800 APU is its ability to stretch its legs with different TDP settings, and out of the box, the Ayaneo Geek can go anywhere from 11 watts up to a spicy 33. Out of the box, the Geek can run at a low-powered power-saving setting of 11 watts, balanced at 15 watts, and a gaming mode of 22 watts. There also is another option to choose a custom value all the way up to 33 watts. Now, I don't really see anyone running their Geek above 22 watts due to the battery restrictions, more on that in just a bit, but I do see that 18 to 22 watt range to be the ideal sweet spot for the Geek. So I went ahead and retested all 4 of these games at both wattage settings to see what our performance looks like. In Hogwarts Legacy, the Geek finally comes alive, besting the deck by 4 FPS in both average and 1% low frame rate. Cyberpunk shows similar behavior, with the 4 watt bump unlocking a 9 FPS boost in average frame rate. Red Dead follows suit, snagging 14 additional FPS, besting the deck by 10 FPS. And the Geek continues to rub salt into the deck's wounds in Grand Theft Auto 5, surging ahead for a nearly locked 60 FPS even with 1% lows. As for the 22 watt results, we do see gains, but at this point, we are hitting diminishing returns, especially in Red Dead and Cyberpunk. Overall, users of the Geek should stick to 18, 19, or 20 watts in order to get the best battery life to performance ratio. I haven't only been testing AAA games on my Geek, I've also started to try out a little bit of emulation. I'm still learning the ins and outs of tweaking my Switch emulation and getting my PS3 library ripped, but I can confirm a few emulators' performances. Consoles up to the 5th and 6th generation work well, with spot checks in F-Zero X, Super Metroid, and Ocarina of Time working through RetroArch. Moving up to the Switch, the Ayaneo Geek can comfortably play Mario Odyssey and Metroid Dread in docked mode at full 60 FPS at 15 watts, of course, minding for shader compilation. As for Breath of the Wild and Link's Awakening, I'm still working out the kinks and getting it to look better and run a bit faster, but 30 FPS at 19 watts is totally playable. Given the decent performance of the Geek at both 15 and 19 watts, let's see how these different settings impact our battery consumption when running the device at 100% utilization. In blue, we have the Geek running in 15 watt mode, while orange is the Geek in 19 watt mode. The deck's battery life was collected using Windows so that all of my data formatting would match, but fear not, I've also checked these results within SteamOS and I also see similar battery life. Now, you might notice a slight curve on all of these lines. I first saw this during my AOK Zoe review, but now that I see it on 3 different devices, I had to tap the Fox for some validation. As it turns out, in Windows, hardware info is underreporting battery draw when the battery is close to full, while it overreports battery draw when it's closer to empty. This is a huge observation to keep in mind when looking at other reviews of handhelds out there, so I went ahead and performed complete runtime battery drain tests instead of just doing the math. This testing alone took about 10 hours to complete, so if you guys find this data useful at all, definitely hit that subscribe button. Back to battery life. Our 15 watt Geek, which performs slightly worse than the Steam Deck, gets an additional 17 minutes of battery life, clocking in at 117 minutes. That 17 minutes is a massive win for the Geek's 50 watt hour battery, since it will give you enough time to find a charger, save your game, or power down your device before it shuts off. And when the Geek bumps the TDP up to 19 watts, we squeeze out extra performance and beat the deck in most instances. This performance claim isn't entirely conclusive, so if you want to see a larger battery of games, smash that like button. As for battery life, we get extra performance with about 4 minutes less life. That trade-off is well worth it. Regarding performance, the Ayaneo Geek delivers where the Steam Deck can't, and that is flexibility. With cooling capacity to spare, the Geek can deliver beyond what the deck can offer when necessary. Its 50 watt-hour battery is an asset worth recognition, allowing gamers that little bit extra of breathing room to either stretch their legs for performance or optimize their setups for better battery life. With arguably better ergonomics and performance than the Steam Deck, what other features help differentiate the Ayaneo Geek from the competition? By far, the most used tool in my testing today was the Aya Quick tool. It has its own dedicated button on the bottom right of the device. At the top, the tool displays general utilization stats for CPU, GPU, and fan. Clicking on the arrow expands to show clock speeds and RAM usage. Pressing down shows the current fan setting, which can cycle between saving, balance, EXC, and wild when you press the A button. Some of these might have been mistranslated, but we'll dig into that a bit later. The resolution setting, of course, changes the desktop resolution to the desired mode. Obvious feature is obvious. Wattage is selectable by clicking down one more time on the D-pad, then cycling through the options with the A button. And just below that, Ayaneo allows users to define additional tasks to execute within the Quick tool, like simulating the Windows button and other common Windows tasks. To make the Windows experience a bit more conducive to a console-like experience, AyaSpace is provided at boot up, and it looks and performs a lot like Steam Deck's big picture UI. The Home tab displays recently detected games, common apps, and many of the same tidbits from the Quick menu. The Games tab is very similar to Steam's Library option within the Steam UI. AyaSpace by default will look for games that are already installed on the device from all of the different launchers out there. Users can also manually add a game to the interface and uninstall them as well. Last is the Assistant tab. It presents an application center that lets you download and update some of the other Aya tools. By default, the Ayaneo Geek ramps its fans aggressively, so I highly recommend you install Smart Fan. I use a custom curve that will run 45% RPM fans at 80 degrees Celsius, and it'll ramp up the fans to 80% at 100°C. This curve suits my use case, but feel free to use any of the built-in presets. As I've covered in another video on the channel, Ayaneo provides a feature called Smart TDP, where rather than fluctuating the frame rate of the device, they try to stay to a static frame rate target and fluctuate the TDP setting of your APU. That way you can have a fluid gaming experience. I haven't really tested it for this video, but I have been working with Timo over at DeckVerse to try and confirm some of the results that he was seeing with Doom 2016, so I would definitely let that feature cook a little bit more in the oven before installing it onto my own device. But if you're interested in seeing how that feature is supposed to work, check out the video up at the top right. I did a deep dive into it, and it's really worth the watch. So for a quick summary, when compared directly to the Steam Deck, the Ayaneo Geek iterates beyond the Valve handheld in some critical areas. The Geek has a better screen, joysticks, buttons, battery, performance potential, I/O, and operating system support than the Deck. The Geek does lag behind the Steam Deck's D-pad, button placement, software ecosystem integration, and price. And that's where I think the rubber meets the road. Would you rather buy a superior performing Windows device or a well-optimized yet limited buy it and forget it type of handheld? Compared to the top tier Steam Deck at $650, the baseline Geek is only $200 more expensive. From a performance per dollar perspective, you get 19% more performance while costing 31% more money. On the surface, that doesn't sound like good value, but keep in mind the upgrades. Tack on Hall Effect joystick upgrades from GillyKit, a better monitor, a larger battery, a more robust processor, and higher bandwidth memory, and I can easily justify the $200 delta. Granted, the Steam Deck's $400 base model is still a high value proposition, but for anyone looking for handhelds with adequate on-device storage, the Geek's upgrades and price point are hard to beat. As for other handhelds, I really can't justify the extra $150 beyond the Geek's base price. The AOK Zoe has an 8-inch screen and a larger battery and is currently on sale for $850. Still, I warn you that the company has difficulty satisfying its current customers and has reported significant RMA rates. GPD is another popular alternative, but the cheapest Win 4 is $1,000, and the Win Max 2 is $1,050 from their Indiegogo page. The Ain Max looks promising, coming in at $775 for a comparable 6-inch model, but I don't know much more about that device. So for now, the Ayaneo Geek is an excellent device. It makes compromises in just the right spots to make it far more affordable and a much better recommendation compared to the Ayaneo 2. Now, when compared to the Steam Deck, even though it costs $650, I think the upgrades that come with the Geek are well worth the $200, and I think that this is actually the better value option for a quality handheld. And that's all I have to say about the Ayaneo Geek. Let me know down in the comments if I missed anything, or if you guys want me to do a more thorough investigation into gaming performance, kind of like what I did with the cryo-utils analysis from my previous video. As always, you can reach out to me directly over on Twitter @TheTurk. And for everyone watching the end of the video, I appreciate y'all very much. I hope you'll have a good one, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.